There is no one in all of Scripture that gets defended more often than the rich young ruler. You remember this guy who loved his possessions so much that Jesus said, you've got to sell everything you have and then come follow me and you'll have treasure in heaven. And we read that story and we jump to that boy's defense. We say Jesus didn't tell everybody to sell all his stuff, and maybe that was just a case for that guy, and we don't want to hear anything that might indicate that we have a problem with money too. We defend the rich young ruler to the hilt. There is nobody else in Scripture who Jesus says, you are wrong, and we say, well, maybe he wasn't. That never happens. This week, we are going to look at the story of the rich young ruler, and we're going to try to avoid two extremes. The first extreme is just defending the guy and saying, well, possessions aren't that bad. We're going to not do that because actually Jesus says possessions can be a huge trap. He says that lots. He says that in lots of different places. So we're going to try to avoid defending having stuff and keeping stuff and holding on to stuff just because we want to do it. On the other hand, we're going to avoid the other extreme that a lot of preachers go to when they preach about money, and that is to say, money is evil and horrible. I've lived enough times in my life counting pennies to buy milk that I know money isn't evil and horrible. In fact, not having money is kind of evil and horrible. So I don't want to defend us just being focused on getting more for ourselves. We don't want to do that. And I don't want to defend saying money is awful, because that's just silly. So what are we going to do with the rich young ruler? What are we going to teach about money this week? Well, what I'm going to do is give you two things to look at in your own life. You are going to be the judge of yourself. I'm not going to ask you for the answers. I'm going to give you some things that you can do a self-examination with to find out whether your relationship with your stuff is proper or not. If it lines up with what Scripture says or not. If you might have a problem or not. If your stuff is really the most important thing in your life, which it shouldn't be. Maybe it isn't. Maybe you'll come to church this Sunday and you'll get these two things. You'll do the self-examination and you'll say, I'm doing really well. And if you do, that's great. If you come this week, though, and you find out that maybe you're thinking too much about money and stuff and possessions and who's got more than you and you're trying to compete with everybody and it's wearing you out, this lesson will be great for you. The sermon is called Telling a Better Story, Examining Our Relationship with Our Stuff. Really practical, really useful, help you to see the good things in your life, regardless of how much you have in the bank. In our Bible study at 10 o'clock, we're going to finish our study of 2 Kings. This is our last week in 2 Kings. We're going to look at the last four rulers of the southern kingdom of Judah. They are all bad. They make bad decisions. They do the wrong things. We're going to learn from their mistakes. And we're going to see why God does what he does when he punishes them. This will wrap up a lot of loose ends. It will be a reminder of the consequences of sin, but also it'll give us some hope. We will look ahead to the next thing God does, which is he treats his people better than they deserve to be treated, which is always true. If you like reading ahead, 2 Kings chapters 23 through 25. We won't read all of it, but we will touch on parts of that. If you read the entire 3 chapters, then you'll have all the background you need for our class. As always, we continue to have lunches on Sunday, which is always fun. That's really great. Bring some food for your family and for one other. We can invite people to stay, which is what I say every week. And just make plans to be here. I think it's going to be really good. I think it's going to be helpful. It's always good for us to get together and catch up. And more importantly than that, worship God and refocus on the things that are really important. That's what this Sunday sermon's going to try and do. Help us refocus. And that's what we can do for each other in song and in prayer and meeting around the Lord's table. It's really, really valuable. Hope to see you there.